Germany have qualified for the World Cup next summer, or have made it to the playoffs when it comes to the World Cup qualification, depending on when you are watching this, because the game against Slovakia, decides that, happens tonight, and I'm recording this obviously beforehand. But things are not as easy as they may seem, and Germany could struggle at the World Cup next summer. Now, I'd like to say before I start this, I think Germany are good enough to get out of the group stage. This isn't another 2018 or 2022 thing. But we start in 2024 when the summer of 2024 and the home Euros was kind of a budget Sommermärchen, which was the summer fairy tale, and it's based on 2006 and that World Cup, because Germany made it in the Euros to the quarterfinals of a home tournament, and if it were not for a dodgy handball call, they would have probably gone further. But since then, the wheels have started to look a little bit wobbly, and the problems started to show in the Nations League last summer. So Italy overcame Italy, which in hindsight is not as big of an achievement. Granted, like, Italy have been Germany's historical rivals, but in terms of what happens on the pitch, wasn't that big of an achievement. They overcame Italy to make it to the finals against Portugal, France and Spain, which would be hosted in Germany. In the semi-final against Portugal, they put in a very tame performance and threw away a 1-0 lead in Munich, and they would eventually be forced to play in the playoff, in the third place playoff. And then in the third place playoff against France in Stuttgart, despite having several chances to score, they failed to score and lost 2-0 to France, and it was again a very tame-ish performance. And so, you can question Germany's ability to face big teams in big tournaments, and you can trace it back to the Euros, where they did not play against a big team until they played Spain in the quarterfinals, which they lost. I mean, they played Denmark, Switzerland, Hungary and Scotland in the road to the quarterfinals, and they even struggled against Switzerland, and that could have put them in doubt for getting it over the line and winning their group. So there were doubts, or the doubts have been there for a while. And that now takes us to the qualifiers for this World Cup, where things have looked far from convincing. The campaign started in the worst possible way as Germany lost 2-0 to Slovakia. Considering Germany's quality standards and the players at Slovakia, they should never have lost this at all, but they did. The next game was a 3-1 win against Northern Ireland in Cologne, where despite the scoreline, the game was not as easy as it suggested. Then in October they beat Luxembourg 4-0 before they then faced another tough game against Northern Ireland in Belfast, winning this 1-0. And then heading into November and the culmination of the qualifiers, Germany had still yet to qualify, while other big nations and teams you may have considered favourites such as Spain, England, France, they've already qualified. And then in the first game of this break, they beat Luxembourg 2-0 away from home in a far from satisfactory performance, which has now set up this final against Slovakia in the final game of qualifying to determine who automatically qualifies and who goes through the playoff. Whether Germany qualify automatically or not, the red flags are now there, which suggest next summer maybe Germany maybe they're not favourites, or in the favourites group as some may suggest. One problem is the tactics. Julian Nagelsmann has decided to flip-flop between them, and there's no clear style of play, whether that's playing Joshua Kimmich in midfield or in defence, struggling to break down a strong defence despite the wealth of attacking talent, or simply just being effective in attack. All of the time, Germany have struggled. Obviously, this could change upon the return of Jamal Musiala, and if Nagelsmann decides to play a more traditional striker with the likes of Tim Kleindienst once he's fit. But considering Germany only have 4 games until the start of the World Cup, work really needs to be done on finding a successive and coherent structure. I mean, against big teams, they have struggled. But against smaller teams more recently, there is little confidence in how they play. And when you come, and and you looked at this in the last video, when you come up against like a smaller team like Algeria in the World Cup, who knows how to play and has a clear plan, it's going to be very difficult for you, especially if stuff like the heat and the weather come into play. Because when you're playing against like a North African team that deals with this heat, you're probably going to struggle. And this is kind of like Nagelsmann's problem, because you can look at someone else. Okay, you can now put into question, is Nagelsmann actually the right type of manager for a national team? But then you look at a manager who, like Ralf Rangnick, who is head coach of Austria, and he's managed to, despite having only a couple of, like you meet with them 5 times a year, but during that time, Rangnick has been able to instill like a style of play in this Austria side, which has been very successful. I mean, at the Euros last summer, they put in a very strong performance in and managed to come out of like the group of death. I mean, they beat the Netherlands. They put in a tough challenge against France, and you know they won the group of death. Granted they lost to France because of an own goal. They beat Poland, and then they convinced against the Netherlands as well. And granted, you know, they kind of struggled in the knockout stages when they lost to Turkey somehow. But if they beat Turkey, you could have like Austria could have gone to the semi-finals, and they would have deserved to have got to that point. And now in the World Cup qualifiers, they're first in their group with still 1 game to play, but it looks like they'll be going to the World Cup again. And Rangnick has been able to instill this style of play in a group who are, some of them are obviously Red Bull trained, you know, but others are not. And some of them, they're not as good as Germany, but they've been able to band together and create this effective style of play. And Nagelsmann struggled to do that. And part of this is, well, most of it's his fault because he's in charge. But he's also the one choosing the players, which is the other problem that this team is encountering. I mean, the most recent squad has highlighted this. Leon Goretzka, Leroy Sané, Nadim Amiri, Rido Baku, and an extra goalkeeper being called up. Neither have been good enough for their clubs or playing a strong enough league, especially when there are other players in the Bundesliga performing at a better level or could be of better use. You know, granted, Sané played well against Luxembourg, but at the end of the day, it's Luxembourg. You know, some of the players who have missed out are Angelo Stiller, which is the big one here, Maximilian Mittelstadt, Dennis Undav, to a lesser extent as he's only just returned from injury, and then Tom Bischoff as well, who has been made to play for the under-21s despite playing well with Bayern and was called up in the previous international break as well. All of these players would have been better choices than the players that I just listed. While the goalkeeper position has also proved to be a problem due to Marc-Andre ter Stegen's injury. You know, ter Stegen was to be the number 1. Now he's injured, and now you have Oliver Baumann in goal. And, you know, Nagelsmann's only just decided to call up Noah Atabolu. And so this has even prompted calls for Manuel Neuer to return to the national team. Nagelsmann has to find the right balance when it comes to calling players up based on form as well as experience. Players like Goretzka and Sané do not offer that at the moment. So, you know, if I was going to pick a Germany squad, it would be 26-man going off the idea that every one of them was fit and in form. Marc-Andre ter Stegen, Oliver Baumann, Atabolu would be the goalkeepers, but obviously you have to hope ter Stegen's there, and if he's not, just Baumann. And you bring in Nubel, who despite actually not being any good at the moment, you know, he can be third choice. In defence, Nico Schlotterbeck, Jonathan Tah, Antonio Rudiger, Waldemar Anton, Joshua Kimmich, Maximilian Mittelstadt, David Raum, and then I've said Namandi Collins. Why? I'll get to that. In midfield, Angelo Stiller, Alexander Pavlovic, Tom Bischoff, Felix Metscher, Asanu Driogo. Then you can have names like Anton Stack and Jamie Lieberling. And then up front it's Jamal Musiala, Florian Wirtz, Nick Woltermatter, Tim Kleindienst, Jonathan Burkhardt, Dennis Undav, Kevin Schade, and Kai Havertz. And so the 11, which my method to my madness, ter Stegen or Baumann, Kimmich, Rudiger, Schlotterbeck, Mittelstadt, Stiller, and then Pavlovic in midfield, Musiala, Woltermatter, and the Wirtz, and then Kleindienst up front. And so for the ones that you may consider questionable, I will now defend them. Collins, Right back is a bit of a problem for Germany. Collins, he can play right back. Granted, when he played for Germany in that position earlier, it wasn't the best. But as a squad player for the World Cup, it should be good enough. He can play as a right back and as a centre back. So that means you have an alternative option to Kimmich, who should go back to right back. Stack has played well for Leeds, and I think he's justified as a call-up, even again as it's a squad player. And then Jamie Lieberling means if you decide to play 3 at the back, which you can do because you have good enough defenders in Schlotterbeck, Tah, Rudiger and Anton, for example, Lieberling can play more as a right wing back opposite Maximilian Mittelstadt or David Raum. And then up front you have obviously the main 3 would be Musiala, Wirtz and Woltemade. And then you have a choice of different profiles up front and on the wing in Schade as well. And also Lieberling can act as a winger. Well, he is a winger. You can use him in that position as well. Obviously Kleindienst, big man, you can just lump it up to him. Burkhardt's slightly different. Undav is also slightly different. Schade, more of a winger, and then Havertz, he's kind of a mixture of Woltemade and Kleindienst as well. So that's the squad I would do and how I would line up, but obviously I'm not the head coach, so basically it's irrelevant. The World Cup is 209 there's 209 days between now and the World Cup start date. Germany should have games against the Ivory Coast, Finland, and then there's reports that they may play America as well. But there's still a lot of work to go and to be done to give Germany a real chance of adding a 5th star to their badge. You have to decide on, okay, how do we want to play? What type of players do we want in the squad? Nagelsmann will have to make some tough decisions. Instead of just relying on this regular buying core, which has been basically the centre of every single of Germany's failures since they won the World Cup. Kimmich, Goretzka, Zane, Gnabry, they've all been there. So it's kind of getting to the point now where you think, okay, if you're not good enough, which to the point is it's really just Kimmich. If you're not good enough, go, get rid of them and bring in players who are good enough and can perform. Because as things stand, yes, Germany will probably exit their group, but they don't instill the confidence that they're going to be able to win a 5th World Cup at the moment. And, if Germany fail to get to the semi-finals or whatever, and I think that's the goal, it should be an improvement on the Euros, then you're questioning, what's the point? What are we doing with Nagelsmann then? Because Nagelsmann is just kind of wasting his career at this point, where he could be building at a club team. But instead he's here, and if he fails again, it would have been clear that Germany peaked at Euro 2024. But it's obviously up to Germany now. Everything I've rendered may be true, or who knows, they may have proven me right as they crash out and end up in the qualifiers, where they'll ultimately draw Italy probably. But let me know what you think. Are Germany in trouble? Where do you think Germany should be improved? What's your ideal squad for the World Cup next summer? Let me know below.